Grab your coffee because today we're serving crime. This is Coffee and Crime AU, where Australia's darkest cases meets your morning brew. I'm Linda, and each week we dive into real investigations, timelines, and the details that just don't sit right. Sip slow, this one's heavy. Welcome back to Coffee and Crime AU. Before we begin, I want to say this clearly. This episode discusses domestic violence and the death of a mother. It's told with care and without graphic detail, but listener discretion is advised. Now let's begin. April 19th, 2012. I want you to imagine a morning that looks like so many others. It's autumn in Brisbane, the air is cool, the street is quiet, houses sit side by side holding private lives behind closed doors. Nothing looks wrong. But inside one of those homes, something irreversible has already happened. That was the morning Allison Baden-Clay disappeared. When I tell this story, I don't want to rush it, because Allison wasn't a case file first. She wasn't a headline. She wasn't a true crime story. She was a person. She was 43 years old, a mother to 3 daughters, a real estate agent. She was organised, capable and trusted. People who knew Allison described her in quiet ways: kind, reliable, the person who checked in, the person who showed up. She didn't demand attention. She mattered quietly, and sometimes those are the people the world doesn't protect well enough. On the morning of April 19th, Allison didn't come back. Later that day, her husband told police she had gone for a walk and never returned. On the morning of April 12th, Allison didn't come back. Later that day, her husband told police she had gone for a walk and never returned, and at first that explanation sounds possible. People go for walks. People need space. People step outside to think. But almost immediately there were details that didn't sit right. Allison hadn't taken her phone, she hadn't taken her wallet, she hadn't taken her keys, and she left behind her children. That detail alone stopped people in their tracks, because parents don't just disappear from their children's lives without a reason. As concern grew, police were notified and searches began. Neighbours walked streets and footpaths. Volunteers searched nearby bushland, flyers were shared, media coverage intensified, and then Allison's husband went on television. Standing in front of cameras, Gerard Baden-Clay made a public appeal. He asked Allison to come home. He spoke about their children. He spoke about fear and confusion. He asked the public for help. To some watching, it appeared emotional. To others, something felt restrained, controlled, almost rehearsed. At the time, no one could explain that feeling, but later the appeal would be replayed in court, examined not as emotion, but as evidence. Behind the scenes, police were spending more and more time at the family home, and slowly, the story shifted. Allison's marriage had not been as stable as it appeared. There were financial pressures, and there was an affair, one Allison had recently discovered, and that detail matters. Not because it excuses anything, it doesn't, but because it explains what happened next. The jury ultimately accepted that the truth in this case did not begin with a morning walk. It began the night before. According to the evidence presented at trial, Allison and her husband argued inside the family home on the night of April 18th and into the early hours of April 19th. The argument centred on the affair. This was not a minor disagreement, it was serious, and it was emotionally charged. During that confrontation, violence occurred. Allison was attacked inside her home. Forensic evidence showed signs of a struggle, disturbed items, damage, and blood traces that could not be explained by an accident and could not be explained by Allison leaving voluntarily. The prosecution argued, and the jury accepted, that Allison was killed during this attack. She did not leave the house alive. After her death, the court found that deliberate actions were taken. Allison's body was wrapped. It was then transported away from the house. This did not happen accidentally. It did not happen in confusion. The jury accepted that these were conscious decisions made after Allison had already died. In the early morning hours, her body was taken to bushland near Brookfield and concealed. Hidden. Left. Later that same morning, Allison was reported missing. There were no signs Allison had left the house on foot. She had taken none of the items a person would normally take, and the forensic evidence inside the home directly contradicted the story. This sequence, the argument, the killing, the movement of Allison's body, and the false account of a morning walk, is what the jury ultimately accepted beyond a reasonable doubt. When Jared Baden-Clay stood in front of the cameras and asked for Allison's return, the jury heard that this occurred after all of these events. In light of the evidence, the media appeal was no longer seen as confusion or fear. It was seen as an attempt to divert attention from what had already happened. 2 days after she was reported missing, Allison was found. Her body was discovered in bushland, and with that discovery, hope ended. This was no longer a search, this was a homicide investigation. And the person at the centre of it all was the man who had spoken to the media asking for her safe return. In 2014, the case went to trial and the country watched. Every detail was examined, every movement reconstructed, every claim tested against evidence. The prosecution argued this was not an accident, not a momentary loss of control, but a violent act followed by calculated steps to conceal it. The jury listened, and they believed the evidence. The verdict was clear: guilty. Jared Baden-Clay was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 15 years. For Allison's family, the conviction confirmed the truth, but nothing about it felt like closure. Because closure doesn't exist when a mother is taken from her children. This case stayed with people across Australia, not just because it was high profile, but because it was familiar. A suburban home, a marriage that appeared respectable, a woman who seemed safe. It forced many to confront an uncomfortable truth. Domestic violence does not always look chaotic. Sometimes it looks controlled. Sometimes it looks polite. Sometimes it looks like everything is fine, until it isn't. When I think about Allison, I try not to focus on the courtroom or on the crime scene. I think about the woman she was before all of this. A mother packing lunches, a professional working hard, a friend replying to messages. She lived a full, ordinary life, and that life mattered. She should still be here. Stories like this are heavy to tell, because they ask us to accept that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it grows quietly. Sometimes it hides behind routine. And sometimes it lives where we least expect it. Often we only recognise it once it's too late. If there is meaning to hold on to, it's awareness. Allison's story has helped bring conversations about domestic violence into the open. It has helped people question assumptions, trust instincts, and take warning signs seriously. And even if one person listening feels less alone because of this story, then her voice continues. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic or family violence, help is available. You deserve safety. You deserve to be heard. Thank you for listening to Coffee and Crime AU. Please remember Allison respectfully. And if you follow this podcast, know this. These stories are told carefully, thoughtfully, and always. Thanks for listening to Coffee and Crime AU. If you found this case interesting, follow the podcast and share it. It really helps the show to grow. And remember, sometimes the smallest detail changes everything.